In October 2021, I made the long trip to Austin, Texas to watch the first ever Rogue Invitational Strongman competition. Given that it's such a long and expensive trip to go there, I may not have gone if it wasn't for the invitation that I had received from Dr. Todd to go and watch the premiere of The Commissioner of Power, an exceptional documentary by Rogue Fitness paying tribute to Dr. Todd, the man that has had more positive influence over strongman than anybody else in the modern era.
We feel if you want to call a man the strongest man in the world, you need to have events that represent strength.
The documentary begins with those words from Dr. Todd. At first, they sound so obvious, but when you think about it, it's that fundamental principle that really matters in strongman, combining not only events that truly test strength, but understanding the historic value of those tests of strength, something that Terry understood better than just about anyone else. Since strongman has been aired to an international audience over 50 years ago, it has struggled to grow in real terms. We still have athletes today competing at World's Strongest Man that also work full-time jobs. There's a constant saying within the sport that we're a small community, and it often feels like if anybody dares to be an outlier, calling for change, saying something should be different, that they're too disruptive to the community. Todd was someone who was brave enough to come out with new concepts and inspire people to follow along. Thankfully, two such people were Bill and Katie Henniger of Rogue, who were able to understand the reasoning behind Terry's grand ideas, the historic value, and why they were important to the future of the sport. And thankfully, they and Dr. Todd have been able to implement these ideas into reality. In the sport of strongman, where it can be difficult to keep the faith, Dr. Todd and Dr. Todd have been absolute pioneers. And nowhere is that more apparent than the wonderful Stark Center for Physical Culture and Sports. The Stark Center is a museum and research center dedicated to the study of physical culture. A truly vast collection of photos, books, documents, memorabilia, and art. On entrance to the center stands over 10 feet tall statue of Hercules weighing over 2,000 pounds. After so many years of Terry and Jan building such a large academic resource collection, they realized the best solution was to create a permanent research center for all of it. One of the most interesting aspects, and something that Dr. Terry Todd had discovered decades ago, is that across all the different sports that are exhibited in the Stark Center, every sportsman and woman has benefited from the use of strength training. This is a place where scholars and students can come and study the intersections of exercise, sport and health, with unparalleled access to physical culture archives. Now, Terry Todd was always fascinated with anyone that he thought might have the physical attributes to be very strong. You see him here with the legendary Andre the Giant, with Vince McMahon having a drink. And then, of course, with Mark Henry, the man that Terry nurtured into becoming the first ever Arnold Strongman Classic champion. And on film set with the then reigning world's strongest man, Hafthor Bjornsson, for a rogue documentary about strength traditions in Iceland. Okay, so what we have here, guys, 2002 was the first ever Arnold Strongman Classic, which Arnold asked Terry Todd to put together and direct. Now, Mark Henry, by this time, had already been a wrestler for around 6 years, but Vince McMahon gave him permission to enter the Arnold Strongman Classic and prove he really was the world's strongest man. And he would be up against people such as Sven Carlson, who was the reigning world's strongest man. Now, of course, famously, Mark went to the competition and won it. And the first event was the Apollon's Axle, which nobody else could even clean and press, and Mark did it for reps. Now, as you see here, in preparation for that, Terry Todd made this wagon wheel barbell to replicate the Apollon's axle that they would be using. And this is what helped Mark train and win that first event in what's an iconic moment in the Arnold Strongman Classic. And what we have here is a rogue deep dish plate. Now, we know these from the Arnold Strongman Classic on the elephant bar. Beautiful looking plates, the ones that everybody around the world wants, but Rogue made them exclusively for the Arnolds. So probably the most sought after. These plates come from a 150-pound block of steel and take 16 hours per plate to machine. And then we had a Lifetime Achievement Award from Arnold Schwarzenegger that he gave to Jan and to Terry. And then here, Alvin Roy Award for Career Achievement, presented to Terry Todd in 2017. And then that Arnold Classic Lifetime Achievement Award, gold dumbbell, presented to Terry in 2014. And it's signed by many, many famous strongmen of past and present. A number of names you'll recognize on there. There's Mark Henry, of course. Amongst the many incredible things in here, historic posters, the famous Eugene Sandow, and this poster is from 1893. All different artifacts that Terry and Jan collected over the years. Now people donate to this great museum. This is interesting. Just the other day I posted on Instagram about the 2010 Mighty Mitts competition, which took place at the Arnold Strongman Classic. And here is one of the implements they used, a circus barbell weighing 500 pounds, huge barbell to grip. You can only just get your hand around, which obviously makes it a lot more difficult. Walking around with my camera, it was very difficult to give you a true sense of the size and layout of the museum. However, it's beautifully set up with flowing corridors running through it. The only way to really find out is to come and see it yourself. Muscle Beach with the likes of Pudgy Stockton on this side. All kinds of artifacts, memorabilia, information. Now this is an important moment. Joe and Betty Weider are shown with Jan and Terry Todd on a visit to Austin in 2004 to announce $1 million gift that led to the creation of the Joe and Betty Weider Museum. Now, yesterday we saw in the movie The Commissioner of Power, Terry gave a speech thanking Joe for this donation and got quite emotional about it, as it was a significant moment in the development of what obviously has become the world's leading strength culture museum.
Had it not been for that first gift, nothing else would have happened. So thank you so much.
For some of you that watch the Rogue movies, you would have seen the one on the Basque stone culture. And you see there, it talks about the documentary, which is on Rhodes' YouTube channel. Now here's a challenge for anybody that thinks they've got good grip strength. A 172-pound anvil belonging to George Jowett, who claimed that he could lift it with one hand. However, most people don't believe that to be true. Could it be? We have here a photo of Vasily Alexeyev, the famous Russian weightlifter, with Jan Todd, who at this time, at the end of the 70s, were considered the strongest man and strongest woman in the world. Down here we have something quite beautiful. Slater stone, 2002, during the first Arnold Strongman Classic, Jill Mills lifted this stone from the floor and placed it on top of 3 Hummer tires. The stone was made by the brilliant Steve Slater, who continues to make stones and logs for the most prestigious strongman tournaments around the world. This rare photo shows a young Josephine Blatt who performed as Minerva in the 1890s. For a time, she and her husband operated a theater and beer garden in San Antonio, Texas. And then if we come over here, Jan was able to acquire this, Minerva's Loving Cup and Championship belt. So the late 19th century, Richard Fox, publisher of the National Police Gazette, gave decorative belts as trophies to champions in boxing, wrestling, and other sports. The only woman to receive such a belt was Minerva, Josephine Blatt, who Mr. Fox, called the strongest woman in the world. It was presented in 1895 after she set a world record in the backlift. She lifted 3,000 pounds, a record that still stands, and we're over 120 years since she broke that record. There's an area here dedicated to Pudgy Stockton, who of course became the symbol of strength in women's sport in the 1940s into the 1950s. She had the look and the strength to go with it, became an absolute icon. An interesting little fact, Jan has a new dog and named it Pudgy, after of course Pudgy Stockton here. See some of the great weightlifters here. Paul Anderson was listed at 5'9", 360 pounds. Below him again, Russia's great Vasily Alexeyev, who dominated weightlifting through his era. And we can come across here into a more modern age. Someone we'll be familiar with strongman, which is Mikhail Koklayev, the great Russian strongman who held the super total world record. Of all the incredible things that are in this museum, certainly one thing of particular note that stands out is this Louis Cyr dumbbell. Of course, the Cyr dumbbell we see at the Arnold Strongman Classic, and we're going to see again at the Rogue Invitational this weekend. And what we have down here is Louis Cyr's dumbbell. Ben Weider acquired this in the 1960s, and his son has now donated this to the University of Texas for a display. So here it is in the Stark Center. This is the Louis Cyr dumbbell, the real one. It's quite incredible. Give you an idea of the thickness of the handle. Could just reach around the entire thing. Historical artifact, one of the most famous implements in strongman. You see the legendary Cleve Dean, strongman and arm wrestler at the 1978 World Strongest Man contest. Beautiful picture there, bending the bar with Jan looking on. And then we see Bill Kazmaier at World Strongest Man. And as the description said, Bill Kazmaier was so dominant in TV's World Strongest Man that he was barred for a time because the TV people didn't want the same man to win every year. Perhaps Bill would have been the first 5 or 6 times World Strongest Man. I don't think there's ever been a strongman so far ahead of his generation as Bill Kazmaier. When I asked Zydrunas Savickas who is the strongest man, he said Bill Kazmaier. Talking of the great Big Z, here he is at the Arnold Strongman Classic, won it 8 times of course. Here we see Poundstone, Mark Henry, Big Z, Super Mario, Mariusz Pudzianowski there, who of course was never able to replicate his achievements in World's Strongest Man at the Arnolds. Brian Shaw, Rich Williams, Big Z setting world records in the Hamataya deadlift. And David Deming, one of the world's great sculptors. So I'll show you some of them. These are the bodybuilding. Dorian Yates, one of my personal favorite bodybuilders. The great Arnold Schwarzenegger. Serge Newbert, 1970s, Mr. Olympia. Man that needs no introduction, Ronnie Coleman. The great Muhammad Ali. Look at these, Dr. Terry Todd. Next to him here, Jan Todd. Just what amazing sculptures these are. And I know that Jan is very grateful that these have been donated to the museum. Gene Sandow, of course. Donald Dinny, now we know that name from the Highland Games. Dinny Stones. Now we're into the boxing section, another of my sport passions. This is Jim Jeffries. This is Jim Jeffries' Trunks and Top from 1899, where he went 25 rounds to defend his world heavyweight title. Someone of particular note here on the wall for me is the legendary Bob Fitzsimmons, the first man to become world champion in 3 weights, middleweight, heavyweight and light heavyweight, at the end of the 1890s into 1903. Now, Bob Fitzsimmons was a Cornishman from Houston, Cornwall, grew up very close to where I did, also being a Cornishman, and is a legend back home. It's very nice to see him here in Austin, Texas, being honoured. In every part of the Stark Center, you could find something amazing, and in this area, I found a section dedicated to Tommy Kono, perhaps the greatest weightlifter of them all, with world records in 4 different weight classes, a double Olympic champion, a multiple world weightlifting champion. To see more and more artifacts that were from the collection of Joe Ryder, and of course his main student Arnold Schwarzenegger, who took the sport of bodybuilding mainstream. There's so many beautiful photos in here. You see these of Arnold. Young Arnold there. And here's a behind the scenes look of Pumping Iron, cult bodybuilding movie. You can see Arnold doing bicep curls there as the crew film him. Arnold winning Mr. Olympia 75. The Commissioner of Power after party had been held at the Stark Center, and of course Jan was the center of attention there, but fortunately she had sneaked me back into the archive section as she knew how interested I would be. The next day when I went back there, fortunately Kyle Martin, the Stark Center's curator, was there. Kyle is a man full of passion for the work that he does. Luckily for me, Kyle showed great patience whilst I rummaged around like a kid in a sweet shop. He was a fountain of knowledge, and I immediately realised that the team that Jan and Terry had assembled meant that the Stark Center would be an absolute pleasure for anybody to come and study at. As you see, there's an endless amount of artifacts. This is a dumbbell made for Mark Henry, meant to weigh 250 pounds, but a mistake by the manufacturers meant it weighed 300 pounds, and not even Mark himself has been able to lift this off the ground with one hand. Henry Bell.
I love that there's still a key and a lock for it. This doesn't have a year, but I bet Jan would be able to, or Mark could tell us.
I'm not sure how long I was there, but Carl kindly offered me lunch on site as he realised I was there for the long haul as we continued to rummage around.
And then, by contrast, here are boots developed for Jan
For Jan?
as a weightlifter.
Oh, really?
These were hers.
Adidas, yeah.
Uh-huh. And I believe they got the strap from ski boots. You know, made new soles as well. These are the actual instrument, which, you know, is essentially snake oil. The idea that you could, you know, increase your grip while curling, you know, and to get home and relax.
Yeah.
And back then, you know, who knows what his view of weightlifting would have been. Meyer, it's really just 2 photos that they have listed as things for him. One of which is a photo print of where he's raising his fist after throwing the stone over the barn at the Highland Games.
Okay, yeah.
It's printed on the If you want, you can unfold it. So this one is by Dennis Rogers, and he signs his. A lot of them will sign after they've done it. If it's in our collection, and related to him.
So it's been a long journey, guys, but one well worth it to get here to Austin, Texas to see the incredible Stark Center. A true history of strength culture. We see strongman, we see weightlifting, we see gymnastics, American football, golf, boxing, but all these things come together in strength, where strength plays a vital part in that. It's just a brilliant flowing museum with anyone like me. It's a dream to come here. I could spend easily a month in here reading through artifacts, looking at once, looking twice at the different things that they've managed to collect here. Just historic things. Perhaps the sear dumbbell is one of my particular favorite things here. Such a historic strength implement. But yeah, an absolute privilege to be here, and I hope you guys have enjoyed just seeing a little bit of what this is about. And if you ever get the chance, make sure you come to Austin, Texas, and come to the Stark Center. It's free to look around. It's just an incredible opportunity for anyone to learn something about our sport and the people that went before us and pave the way for where we are today. If you know anything about strongman, if you enjoy strength sport, I implore you to come here. Put yourself in this room and just see the incredible things that are here. How anyone could come here and not absolutely love it and appreciate the body of work that Terry and Jan Todd have put together. I don't know, because it's something very, very special. This is what people in the sport should be making videos about, talking about. I think we've seen enough what I eat in a day, how many calories I eat. Let's come here, let's educate fans, educate ourselves on what our sport is all about, the history of it, that have been a lifetime's work from Terry and Jan Todd to put this incredible collection together that keeps on growing. Just a privilege to be here. I'll be back. And of all the most important people in here, it's these two here, Terry Todd and Jan Todd, encapsulated brilliantly in these two sculptures. But these are the people we have to thank for making this all happen, for giving us this great, great museum. So I want to say a big thank you to them both.